about why sharks matter, but I want to talk to you a little bit about what NOAA does, and that's where I worked. It's right down the street, those 3 or 4 giant buildings over there. The budget came out tonight, administration, and it is a 40% cut to NOAA. The entire research wing of NOAA gets axed out. These will have substantial impacts to the way we all live our lives. Who here knows it's going to rain tonight? Yeah? Yeah, that's thanks to NOAA. If you look at a radar, that's thanks to NOAA. So these cuts will have incredible impacts, but it's also not the end. Just because the president's budget comes out does not mean that is the budget that passes. So it's incredibly important for all of us right now to speak up about all these things, contact your congressman, and just be loud and obnoxious. That's what I'm quite good at. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce our main speaker, Dr. David Shiffman. He is a shark conservation scientist, an award-winning public speaker and science educator and author. His writings have appeared in National Geographic, Scientific American, Washington Post, and a monthly column in Scuba Diving Magazine. He is one of the most followed scientists on social media, and invite you to follow him at Why Sharks Matter. David.
All right, thank you, John and Tom. Can people hear me? The sound was louder a moment ago. Sorry, friends watching live. We're messing with technology here. That's better? You can hear me now? Wonderful. So I am thrilled to be here with you tonight to talk about something that has been my favorite thing to talk about since I was about 3 years old, and that is sharks. But tonight, in partnership with Stand Up for Science, which is a wonderful organization that I hope you'll all support, we have some QR codes here if you want to sign up to learn more or donate. I'm going to be talking about my world of shark science and conservation, but with a little bit more about, and that's why federal funding of science is important and should be supported. So who the heck am I taking over this bar on a Friday night? Some of you were actually here the last time I took over this bar, which was for the launch of my book tour series. I think there's at least 3 of you that were here the last time, because you're nerds. I appreciate you all nerds. I am an ocean conservation scientist who studies sharks and how to protect them, and I'm also a public science educator and a science writer. I am the author of the book Why Sharks Matter, which we do have some copies of for sale. If anyone's interested, I'm happy to sign and personalize them for you at the end of the evening. But I also invite you to follow me on social media at Why Sharks Matter, where I'm always happy to answer any questions that anyone has about sharks, and always always sharing new news about this stuff. So I've loved sharks, as I mentioned, for a really, really long time. I'm 4 years old in this picture. I feel like most kids go through a shark thing or a dinosaur thing at some point in their lives, and I just never grew out of mine, and I'm really lucky that I get to live my childhood dream every day. Tonight, I want to tell you a little bit about why sharks have held my attention for so long, and some about them in a career of studying them and a lifetime of being obsessed with them. And at the end of this, I would be delighted to answer any questions that anyone has about Stand Up for Science, about me, about sharks. I do an Ask Me Anything on social media every week, which means I can just about promise that the weirdest question you can think of is not the weirdest question I've ever been asked. I'm happy to answer anything that you want to know. I just ask that you please hold it till the end of the talk. So Stand Up for Science is a wonderful organization that I'm delighted to be partnering with for this. Science is very much under attack right now. Not just the budget that came out today, though, oh my God, that's horrific, and that will make your life worse. We should fight it, we should protest it, and one of the things that scientists in particular and supporters of science can be doing is work like Stand Up for Science. So we have these flyers throughout the bar, as well as some of them up here, with a QR code you can scan on your phone. You can learn more about this great organization, and you can donate to support them. So all summer long, especially for those of you watching virtually, Stand Up for Science is trying to do 1,000 of these teach-in events around the United States. I am the first one, so no pressure, but anyone who wants to do this, I invite you to read the briefing packet that's on the website, and I invite you to chat with me. I am happy to help. But for now, let's go back to sharks. More on Stand Up for Science later. So one of the things that I absolutely love about sharks is how weird and different they are. They're absolutely amazing as a biologist. They're so different from other forms of life in so many incredible ways that teach us a lot about the ocean, about the planet, and about ourselves. So that starts on their inside with their skeleton. So if I could get everyone who is, those of you who are actually listening to this, which is a bunch of you, I'm shocked to see and thrilled to see here on a Friday night, if you could hold your arm out in front of your face and pick a point about halfway between your wrist and your elbow and try to bend your arm there. Hopefully you can't. If anyone can, let's stop and call 911. But that's because your bones, or that's because your skeleton is made of bone. It is very strong, but it doesn't heal very fast, and it's not very light, and it's not very flexible. In contrast, what I want you to do now is crinkle your ears, crinkle your nose. You feel the difference there? That's cartilage. Sharks entire that. They do not have bones. That means that they are much more flexible and much lighter, but it also means that their bodies don't have the strength to survive for very long out of water, and it also means that they're flexible enough that if you grab a shark by the tail, they can bite your hand while you're holding the tail. One of very many reasons you should not grab a shark by the tail. Sharks also have an entire sense that we don't have at all. I don't just mean they can see better than we can, though they can. I don't just mean they can smell better than we can, though very famously they can. I mean they have an entire way of perceiving stimuli in the world that we don't have at all. They can sense electromagnetic fields. Let me tell you why that's helpful if you're a shark. If your prey animal is hiding under the sand, where you can't see it or hear it or smell hungry, but sharks, they still know it's there because they can sense the electromagnetic field given off by its beating heart, and they can still find prey. They also use this amazing electrosense to navigate in the open ocean. If any of you have the Shark Tracker app or something like that that follows GPS tagged sharks, you may wonder, how do they know exactly where do they go? How do they find their way exactly back to the same point? And part of the answer here is this sixth sense that sharks have that we don't have at all. So there are a wide variety of different species of sharks that are found in our oceans. When I give talks to school groups, I have people shout out different shark species that they can think of. The most I've ever gotten in 20 seconds is about 25 species of sharks, which is pretty good for elementary school students. But there are actually over 540 known species of sharks, and there is a new species of shark skate, ray, or chimera discovered somewhere in the world about every 2 weeks. They come in just about every shape and size and color that you can think of. Some live in the open ocean where they never encounter a hard surface in their whole life. Some of them live in the deep sea where they never see sunlight in their whole life. Some of them live under Arctic ice caps. U.S. Navy, if you want to know if there are sharks in the water near you, you dip your finger in the water and you taste it, and if it's salty, that means you're in the ocean and there are probably sharks near you. And that's true, but it's incomplete because many species also live in rivers. These are some of my favorite weird and wonderful shark species that can give you a sense of just how amazing and diverse this group of animals is. In the lower right here, you have the American pocket shark. Did we just get TV sound on or something? Okay. This is the American pocket shark. It is not called that because it's small enough to fit in your pocket, though it is. It's called that because of this little pocket of flesh it has behind its eye that's full of glow-in-the-dark liquid that they can squirt on command to startle away predators. Absolutely incredible animals. In the center, that's the angular rough shark. Most people think about sharks as being sleek, powerful, athletic. This is the complete opposite of that. These are the couch potatoes of the ocean, and I love them for that, especially lately. Picture an overinflated football with comically large dorsal fins glued on, and you're well on your way to an angular rough shark. In the lower left, that's a megamouth shark. They're one of 3 species of shark that filter feeds. Many of you may have heard of whale sharks. This is another one like that. But what I love about them, among other things, is other than the fact that they have glow-in-the-dark gums, which make plankton swim into their mouth, talk about snack time goals, is their scientific name. Most scientific names, if you remember from 7th grade life science, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species, all that nonsense, most of them translate to something like the brown bird with the gray spot on its head. This is Megacosma pelagios, the giant mouth of the deep. By science standards, that's poetry. In the top center, that's a frilled shark. Most shark species swim by moving their tail back and forth, but not frill sharks. They undulate their whole bodies just like a snake. Absolutely incredible animals. And these animals also, of course, have amazing behaviors. This is a goblin shark, another one of the deep sea weirdos I talked about. Lots of animals can hyperextend their jaws in front of their face like this. Snakes do this all the time, but nothing does it as fast or as far as a goblin shark. That video is slowed down 100 times. When that video is not slowed down, there's a fish in front of the shark, and then there isn't. That video in the upper right, that's not slowed down. That's how fast Greenland sharks move. They are the slowest moving large animal in the ocean, but they're in no particular hurry because they can live to be 400 years old. They're not considered to be reproductively mature adults until they're in their late 160s, which is a really long time to be going through puberty. They also eat polar bears and reindeer. Absolutely incredible animals. That's a thresher shark. Their tail can be as long as the rest of the shark or longer. And until about 10 years ago, we had no idea what they used that for. It seemed to get tangled in fishing lines a lot, but that was about it. Until scuba divers filmed this, and we learned that they use it as a whip to make a shockwave underwater that stuns little prey fish that they can then munch on. On the left side here, that is the largest of the shark species whose whole bodies can glow in the dark. The lantern, this is called a kitefin shark. But lantern sharks, there's a whole group of them. Their whole bodies glow in the dark. They're absolutely awesome. And my favorite lantern shark is called the ninja lantern shark. And it's called that because my friend and colleague Vicky Vasquez discovered it around Thanksgiving. And she was home with her family and everyone was talking about what's new at school, what's new at work. And she says, I discovered a new species of shark and I get to name it whatever I want. And her 7-year-old cousin says, ninjas are cool, call it a ninja shark. So she did. Where baby sharks come from is also fascinating and weird and different. I apologize for any parents here. You cannot come to a Shark Talk anymore and not get at least one baby shark joke. I don't make the rules. But some sharks give live birth just like mammals. That's what you're seeing on the top here. That's a lemon shark being born. And as soon as that shark is born, it just has to be a mini shark and take care of itself immediately. Sharks have no parental care at all. Some sharks lay eggs. That's actually a skate egg case at an aquarium with the top removed so you can see what is happening here. But other ways where baby shark comes from are equally diverse and fascinating. Some shark species can essentially clone themselves. Some shark species, when there's not a suitable daddy shark around, the mommy shark can just say, I would like to have babies, and become pregnant, and instead of the babies being a mix of the DNA of mom and dad, they're exact genetic replicas of the mom. Other sharks can go through mating and then decide, you know what, now it's not a great time for me to be pregnant, but I went through all the trouble of mating, so I'll just store the shark sperm inside my body and become pregnant later at a time of my choosing. The record for this is 4 years after mating that it works. So where baby sharks come from is... So when most people think about sharks, it's being a threat to you and your family. And this, I wrote this 10 years ago, so we're now actually coming up on the 50th anniversary of Jaws, if anyone here wants to feel old. Most people, when they think about sharks, they think about sharks being really dangerous, and they picture the shark in Jaws. But that's not how sharks behave. That's not how sharks act. There's actually something in public policy literature called the Jaws effect, which is how fictional portrayals of real-world issues affect people's policy preferences for real things. One example of this is the television program CSI, which many of you may have seen, made it a lot harder for district attorneys to get convictions because people thought that the science would always make it unequivocally clear who did something. So sharks are not a threat to you and your family. Every once in a while, a shark does hurt someone, and any human death or injury is a tragedy. But here are some things that kill more people than sharks in a typical year. These include flower pots falling on your head from above when you walk down a street. I never understood that one until COVID lockdown happened and I saw some of my apartment neighbors try to set up herb gardens. Now I understand why flower pots are falling to the street all the time. More people are bitten by other people on a typical New York City or in the New York City subway system in a year than are bitten by sharks in the whole world in a year. I can always tell who's been to New York City by your facial expressions when I say that. Some people are going, really? And some people go, yeah, I can see it. As a social media guy, I love this one. More people die in a typical year falling off cliffs trying to take a selfie of the beautiful scenery behind them than are killed by sharks. But not only are sharks not really bad, they're actually actively good. We are better off with healthy shark populations off our coasts than we are without them because of the valuable ecosystem services that they provide. They help keep the food chain regulated. So without top predators, these food chains can start to unravel in ways that are really hard to predict, but can be ecologically and economically absolute. Unfortunately, many species of sharks face very, very serious conservation challenges. More than a third of all known species of sharks and their relatives are assessed as threatened with extinction by the IUCN Red List. The number one threat by far, so much that there's functionally not really a number two threat, is unsustainable fishing practices. It's us. We're killing too many sharks. And a lot of people who are sort of casually aware of sharks and shark conservation believe that the number one threat to sharks is shark finning and the shark fin trade. That hasn't been true in 30 years. A recent UN report said that the imports of shark fins and the shark fin trade has declined dramatically. And you might be thinking, oh, that's great news. The threat that I've heard of is declining. But remember, I just said more than a third of all known species are threatened. The threat now is the meat trade. The shark meat trade is important to consider separately because it often involves different species of sharks than the fin trade, and it definitely involves different countries. I watch a lot of ocean conservation documentaries. I talk to a lot of ocean conservation folks on social media. You often hear China and Japan portrayed as the bad guys of the environment, right? I've never heard Spain and Portugal talked about that way, but their fishing practices are more damaging to more species of threatened marine life than China or Japan. So think about always who the bad guy is portrayed in your stories. I have also talked to some ocean conservation enthusiasts who have told me that doesn't bother them. That's a mako shark steak. Or that, shark fin soup, that's evil, that's vile, that's repulsive. But that's fine, because that's how normal people eat fish. Other than the fact that that makes no damn sense from a conservation perspective, either way you've got a dead shark, that's also super racist. You can be forgiven for not having heard this. One of my areas of research over the last few years has been public understanding of ocean conservation issues, and we found that shark finning and the shark fin trade is discussed in 6.5 times as many English-speaking or English language newspaper articles as the shark meat trade, even though the shark meat trade is a bigger problem, a more rapidly rising problem, and one that actually affects English-speaking countries. Important thing that I've learned in my career studying sharks is this is all very bad news, but it is not too late. We know how to save these animals. We know what can be done. We know what should be done. We know what works. We know when it works. We know what we need to make it work. We know when we need your help to make it work. And we know what does not work. So you guys didn't come here tonight for a law school lecture. Apparently some of you didn't know there was any kind of lecture happening, so thanks for sticking around. But I have given this as a law school lecture. I'll give you a quick mini intro to this here. The number one threat to sharks is unsustainable overfishing, and there are two main policy schools of thoughts about what to do with that. One is, let's make the fishing more sustainable. If you've ever been fishing in any capacity, you've probably seen rules like this. Size limits, if it's too small, you throw it back. Total quotas, you can only catch so many of these in a day, in a week, in a year. There's also a newer school of thought which says, no, we need to ban all fishing for sharks. We need to ban all trade in shark products. These are things like shark fin trade bans. These are things like shark sanctuaries, no-take marine protected areas, things of that nature. If any of you have taken an Intro to Environmental Science class, you've probably come across this debate of the debate between Gifford Pinchot, the first chief of the U.S. Forest Service, and John Muir, the first chief of the National Park Service. This is what we're talking about here is conservation versus preservation. Are we protecting nature for the sake of protecting nature, or are we protecting nature for benefit? And most Westerners would agree that anchovies are natural resources to be sustainably exploited. And most Westerners would agree that the great whales are not. They're wildlife. We should protect wildlife. But sharks sort of fall awkwardly in the middle here, which makes it, as an interdisciplinary scholar of conservation, a really fascinating place to work, but as someone who's very active on social media, frequently a frustrating place to work. It should perhaps be noted that I asked all of the shark scientists in the world what they think we should do about this, and 90% of all the shark scientists said, given the choice, we should try to make shark fishing more sustainable, not try to ban all shark fishing, not try to ban all trade in shark products. And if you've never tried to talk to an entire field of scientists, getting all of them to agree, getting 90% of people to agree on anything is absolutely staggering. So this is pretty convincing evidence of what most experts want. And another important theme that we've learned here, hey guys, is that lots of people want to help. Lots of people are trying to help. But wanting to help and trying to help are not the same thing as actually helping. Good intentions are great, I guess, but they're not as good outcomes, and we don't have to guess whether or not something actually works. There are lots of people who are well-intentioned but not especially well-informed, and there's also a very, very active scam fraud industry based around exploiting those people. Sorry, wrong button. So part of the issue here has to do with wording, making sure you correctly identify the problem and its solution. This was, about 10 years ago, the most shared ocean conservation image on Instagram. It shows a bunch of and it went viral with the hashtag #StopSharkFinning. I'm not going to go into too much detail about what shark finning is or isn't here, but this is absolutely not shark finning. If the animal is brought to land with its fins still attached, that is not what shark finning means, even if the fins are later removed or sold. And you may be thinking, that's a confusing term for it. It is. It wasn't the public science educators who made these terms, it was the lawyers. But that is absolutely not shark finning, so stopping shark finning would not stop that. Some more amusing examples of this idea that trying to help is not the same thing as helping. There are people who engage in wildlife harassment and call it conservation. There are people who ride sharks. There are people who hug sharks. There are people who kiss sharks. You guys, they take a shark, they grab the shark, and they put the bitey end of the shark on their face. Don't do that. And when you're called on that, don't say, oh, I'm raising awareness for conservation. I don't know what the hell is happening in that picture, but it is not conservation and it's not science. There's also this problem with these online petitions. Change.org, some of you may be familiar with, they bill themselves as anyone can change the world, anyone can make a petition about anything, but what that means is a lot of people who don't have a clue what they're talking about make petitions that are full of nonsense, such as this one to ban shark finning in the state of Florida, which got 60,000 signatures. I know there are a bunch of NOAA and Fish and Wildlife Service and EPA friends here. 60,000 people engaging in an issue is a lot more than normal. I read an analysis recently that said the median number of public comments submitted on issues through the Federal Register is 0 comments. So 60,000 is a lot. And not one of these 60,000 people who signed this petition 2 years ago was apparently aware that we banned shark finning in 1993. This is a petition that cannot possibly accomplish its stated goal because its stated goal was accomplished before the person who wrote the petition was born. All this does is waste everyone's time and confuse people about what the threats are and what the solutions are. So who's responsible for fixing all of this stuff? Who's responsible for managing all this? You heard from Tom right before here about the importance of NOAA, which is very much under threat under the Trump administration for several months now, and with the new budget released today. This is really bad. This will make your life worse and will not make anyone's life better. I wrote a blog for the Union of Concerned Scientists a couple of weeks ago that was all about all the amazing and important stuff that NOAA does. I've heard a lot of people talking about NOAA in the context of the National Weather Service, but they do so much more, and it is things that affect your life. I encourage you to check out this blog post. Whenever I talk about making shark fisheries more sustainable, people ask me, is it possible to have a sustainable fishery for sharks? Yes, it absolutely is. We're some of the world leaders in this, at least for now, thanks to our friends at NOAA. And as an amateur home cook, I did not think that that was how I was going to end up getting quoted in Food and Wine magazine, but it totally counts. I've been quoted in Food and Wine magazine. So you may be wondering, are sharks in particular related to current political trends? And you'd be shocked at the extent to which they are. Our current president, Donald J. Trump, has a decades-long fear and or active hatred of sharks. These are real tweets. I swear to God, real tweets posted by the now president of the United States. Sharks are last on my list, other than the losers and haters of the world, is a real thing that was said. If anyone can come to a lot of these nerdy events, I'd encourage you to check out the Nerd Night DC series. In July, I'm going to be talking all about Donald Trump's lifelong irrational fear and the extent to which he talks about sharks. But a sneak preview for you here, something that you might not be aware of, is that in 2015, in January 2015, they were casting for Sharknado 3. Oh, hell no. That's the real name of the movie. That was the first one that was going to take place in Washington, D.C. Donald J. Trump wanted to play the president in a 2015 movie and was told, I'm sorry, we offered that role to Mark Cuban, but you can play the vice president to Mark Cuban. Donald Trump flew into a rage on the phone for a long time, said some real nasty things to the producers of Sharknado 3, oh hell no, and 6 weeks later announced he was running for president for real. So more on that at my Nerd Night DC talk in July. So NOAA and other federal science plays a vital role in making our oceans safe, in making our seafood safe, in protecting endangered species, in saving the whales, in anything related to the ocean that you can think of, and that these things are very much under attack. Stand Up for Science is here to help, but they need your help. They need your financial support. They need you to spread the word. They need the science nerds in the audience here to come give a talk. So again, we have these QR codes out on the front table. I encourage you to come up here, scan that, throw them a few bucks, sign up. If you want to give a talk, talk to me. I'm going to be leading some training for anyone in the US who wants to do that, including those of you watching virtually. Donate what you can. Giving a teach-in if you can is great, but I want to just briefly mention here that I spoke out against some of this stuff during the election campaign. I was part of a group called Biodiversity Leaders for the Harris Walls campaign. I wrote an op-ed talking about how Project 2025 was really bad for the ocean, and some of my professional colleagues would say things to me like, you should really stay in your lane, stick to sharks, stick to the ocean stuff. And now we hear stories today that they're talking about a 40% budget cut to NOAA. How the hell is that not my lane? So back to sharks to wrap up here, and then I'm happy to take any questions. Lots of books that exist about sharks, so why did I want to write another one, or to write Why Sharks Matter? Because there are lots of books about sharks that work as graduate school level textbooks, but they're not accessible to lay audiences. There are lots of books about sharks that are like fun facts about sharks with pretty pictures, and on the last page it says, sharks are in trouble, don't eat shark fin soup, and that's it. There's nothing in the middle. So I wanted to write Why Sharks Matter to thread that needle. Because of all the public science engagement talks like this that I do, I knew that there were people who wanted to learn a little more, even if they weren't ready to read. And I've been absolutely thrilled at the reception that it's got. It came out 3 years ago last week. I've been fortunate to get to travel all over the world talking about this. I gave a talk about sharks in Antarctica. Really fascinated, and some penguins who didn't seem to really care that much. In fact, the place where I launched the book and the book tour was right here at Silver Branch in downtown Silver Spring. And some of you were, I count at least 3 of you who were here at that talk. So it's really great to be back here. Thanks to my friends at Silver Branch for letting us come back to launch the Stand Up for Science Summer Teach-In series. But if any of you watching, either in the bar here or online at home, I will go anywhere that has an audience and a speaker travel budget. So would be delighted to chat with you more about this. Why Sharks Matter at Gmail. For those of you in the room, I have some business cards up on the center table. So before I take your questions, I just have some folks I want to thank. I want to thank the Stand Up for Science team for getting this important conversation started, especially Colette, the president of Stand Up for Science, who got to come out on a shark research expedition with me in Florida a few weeks ago, Stephen, who's a local host, and the rest of the Stand Up for Science team. I want to thank our friends at Silver Branch for inviting us back here. I want to thank my family for always supporting my crazy career goals. When I was 5 years old, I told my dad, I want to be a marine biologist, and he said, I don't know what that is, but I'll find out. And now he's retired and he brings his golf buddies on shark research trips. I want to thank Johns Hopkins University Press for giving me a lot of freedom to write a very different type of shark book. My goal from the start was rigorous enough to be used as a graduate school textbook, but accessible enough that anyone who sort of likes sharks can pick it up and follow along. We nailed that. I want to thank friends and colleagues, many of whom are in the room tonight. Thank you for years of fact-checking and proofreading and listening to me talk about my vision for this. And finally, I want to extend a deep and sincere thanks to you. Right now, I'm getting to travel all over the world, sometimes just a few miles away from home, but as far as Antarctica, talking about my favorite thing to talk about since I was 5 years old, and I could not do that if no one was here to listen. So thank you. Before I take your questions, I want to tell a quick funny story. In 2019, I was a sponsor of the Sigma Xi conference, which was basically a national science fair, and I had this exhibit booth that said, ask me anything you want about sharks. And I sat there for 3 days, and people came and asked me questions about sharks. And at one point, I got up to go to the bathroom, and I got back, and there was a 9-year-old boy sitting in that chair answering people's questions about sharks. I think he perhaps misunderstood what the booth was, but he got most of the questions right. I watched him for a while. So I am optimistic that maybe at some point I can retire, but in the meantime, I'm having the time of my life. Thank you to Stand Up for Science. Thank you to Silver Branch. I'd be delighted to take any questions that anyone has. Thanks. Yes, please. I'll repeat the question so friends here can hear. Yes. Great. So the question was about the impact of trawling, which is a commercial fishing gear that some of you may have heard of. It was just featured very heavily in a trailer for David Attenborough's new movie and got lots of attention. So trawling is dragging a large net behind a fishing vessel, often dragging it across the seafloor, where it leaves scars on the seafloor that are visible from satellite from outer space. It is an extremely common fishing method. About a quarter of all seafood in the world is landed using trawling. It has been compared in terms of its ecosystem-wide and bycatch impacts to burning down a forest to catch rabbits. There are some places we should not be trawling, but I am not against trawling in general. It's a vitally important method of catching seafood, and it can be done in sustainable ways. Generally, it's not that big a deal for sharks. It's generally a bigger impact for things that are sort of slower and can't get out of the way. But it can be quite ecologically devastating, but it absolutely can be done sustainably. Great question. Thank you. Yeah, please. question was, can sharks see better than us? What does that mean? They can see better than us in open ocean conditions. They can see better than us in murky water. They can see better than us in bright. They can see better than us in low light. There is some evidence that some species can see color spectrum on the wavelength that we can't really see. There are some species that don't see that well. There's a thing among surfers that they talk about, don't wear a yellow wetsuit because it's yum yum yellow is the phrase. I don't think there's a lot of truth to that because certainly the silhouette from below, you absolutely cannot see what color the wetsuit is, but many species of sharks have incredibly good vision. Anybody? I don't think we have the ability to take questions remotely. Yeah, there are a few, please. I can't quite hear you. Can you come over a little closer? Sorry. We only have the one microphone.
What's the number one threat to sharks today, you would say?
So the number one threat to sharks, unequivocally, without a doubt, is unsustainable overfishing practices, which is not just shark finning, shark fin soup. It's not just bycatch for other species. It's humans killing too many sharks. There is not really a number two threat to sharks. It's among the species of sharks that are threatened with extinction on the IUCN Red List, 100% of them list overfishing among their top threats. The next largest is, I think, 12%, and that's habitat loss. The next largest is climate change, which is very few sharks. Many can just move. So unsustainable overfishing. I saw some in the back. Yes? Great question. What makes a fishery sustainable? That is actually the subject of my second book coming next spring from Johns Hopkins University Press. But the short answer is we're talking about fisheries that leave enough fish in the water so that they can have babies and replace what we caught, as opposed to overfishing, which is when we don't do that. It's a lot more complicated than that, and I'll be happy to send you a copy of the book when it comes out, John. But that's basically what we're talking about here. We know how many sharks are there or how many fish are there. We know how many babies they have. We have rules in place to make sure we're not taking too many, and those rules are enforced and updated with new data. Yes? Oh, great question. What can you do to help sharks? The number one threat to sharks, again, is unsustainable overfishing. So the number one thing that most people can do to help is don't buy unsustainable seafood. Notice that I didn't say we all have to give up seafood and become vegan or else the oceans are doomed, as you may have heard in some sort of in some dumpster fire of lies and nonsense movies like Seaspiracy on Netflix. Not true. What we need is to support sustainable fisheries. And if you don't know what that means, one, you can sign up to get alerted when my new book is coming out. But two, there's a great free tool called Seafood Watch from the Monterey Bay Aquarium. You can download it for free on your phone. They used to give you little cards that fit in your wallet. It's all digital now. That will tell you everything that you need to know. You tell it where you live. It gives you a list of the seafood in your area, sorted into green, which is environmentally friendly. Yellow, every once in a while you can have some as a treat, but don't make a habit of it. And red, which is maybe order the chicken, this is trouble. Yes, Rob.
As you think about sharks right now, what is your current reason that sharks matter?
So what is my current reason when I'm thinking about sharks for why sharks matter? The title of the book, as well as my social media handles. Sharks help keep the food web in balance. They help, when we talk about ocean and coastal ecosystems that billions with a B of humans depend on for food or for livelihoods. When you want the food chain healthy, you need to keep the top of the food chain healthy. When you lose the top of the food chain, it can have destabilizing effects throughout the whole thing. This can sometimes be called a trophic cascade. This gets confusing really fast, but when you remove the top of the food chain, the whole thing can unravel. So sharks matter because they keep food chains healthy. Yes, please, Rick.
What are the top species
that are overfished? So there's a bunch of shark species that are assessed as critically endangered. So within the IUCN Red List hierarchy, once something, and this gets technical and legalese very quickly, I apologize. Once something is assessed by the IUCN Red List, it can be least concern. That's what you want to be. If you're a species, you want to be least concerned. They're doing great. Then there's vulnerable, which is we're starting to get a little worried. And then there are the 3 threatened categories. Then there's near threatened, which is starting to get trouble. Then there's the 3 threatened categories, which is vulnerable, pretty bad, starting to get alarmed, endangered, really bad, starting to get alarmed, and critically endangered is worst case. Critically endangered is they may go extinct within the next decade or so. There are a variety of shark species that are assessed as critically endangered. Right now, the species that we're talking about a lot in global shark conservation circles is the Magellan skate. It only lives in one harbor in southern Australia, and they're talking about a huge salmon farming industry in that harbor. And the pollution from that, as well as using up all the oxygen, will drive the Magellan skate extinct. There's very, very, very rarely in conservation policy circles a thing where it's like, vote yes on this and the species will continue to exist, vote no and it'll be totally gone. Usually it's more complicated than that. Magellan skates are hanging on by a thread right now. All right. Maybe one more question, and then if anyone is interested in getting a copy of the book, those of you who are here in the bar, I do have some here. I'd be delighted to sign them for you. Anyone following along online, if you can get a copy from your favorite local bookshop and email me, I'll send you a signed book plate. But maybe one more question from the room. Yes?
How will NOAA budget cuts affect sustainable fishing?
Great question. How will these terrible NOAA budget cuts that were announced this week affect sustainable fishing? Well, it makes it harder for people to do their jobs. It makes it harder for them to gather the data that we need to make informed decisions. It makes it harder for them to analyze that data. It makes them harder for them to turn that data into regulations. It makes it harder to communicate those regulations to fishermen. It makes it harder to enforce those regulations. So every step of the way, this is bad news. And there's several whole divisions of NOAA that are just zeroed out and eliminated in this budget. NOAA, among other things, it's one of the best investments we can make in coastal communities.